The message arrived on a Tuesday morning, crackling through every radio frequency on Earth simultaneously. Dr. Sarah Chen was reviewing atmospheric data in her Beijing laboratory when her equipment suddenly erupted with an alien transmission that made her coffee mug slip from trembling fingers. Primitive species of the third planet, the voice resonated with mechanical precision, translated into every human language at once. You have been observed. Your violent nature and technological advancement present a threat to galactic stability. You have 72 standard cycles to demonstrate peaceful intentions, or face immediate sterilization. Within hours, the world's governments scrambled into emergency sessions. The United Nations building in New York became a fortress of activity as representatives from every nation gathered to address humanity's first contact with alien intelligence. The message had included coordinates pointing to a massive fleet position just beyond Jupiter's orbit, their ships visible through the Hubble telescope as dark silhouettes against the gas giant's swirling storms. President Martinez of the United States stood before the emergency assembly, her face grave but determined. Ladies and gentlemen, we face an unprecedented challenge. These beings have given us roughly 3 months to prove we are worthy of continued existence. We must respond not as individual nations, but as one unified species. The Chinese delegate, Ambassador Liu, raised his hand. What evidence do we have of their capabilities? How do we know this isn't an elaborate hoax? As if responding to his skepticism, every screen in the building flickered to life. The alien fleet materialized in perfect clarity, showing ships the size of cities floating effortlessly in space. Energy readings indicated power sources that defied human understanding of physics. The message was clear: without words, resistance would be futile. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the world's leading xenobiologist despite never having studied actual aliens until now, stood to address the assembly. Based on their technology and the precision of their communication, these beings are likely thousands of years ahead of us scientifically. However, they gave us a chance to respond rather than simply destroying us immediately. This suggests they follow some form of ethical protocol. Or they're playing with their food, muttered the British representative under his breath. The Russian delegate leaned forward. What constitutes peaceful intentions to a species that can cross interstellar space? Our entire history is marked by conflict. How do we suddenly prove we've evolved beyond our nature? General Thompson of the Joint Chiefs stepped to the podium, his decorated uniform catching the harsh fluorescent lights. With respect to the diplomatic corps, we need to consider all options. Our military capabilities are obviously inadequate against this threat, but perhaps we can demonstrate our peaceful evolution through our response to this crisis itself. Dr. Chen, who had been quietly observing from the back of the room, suddenly spoke up. General, what if our response isn't about abandoning our nature, but showing how we've channeled it? Humans are aggressive, yes, but we're also remarkably adaptable. We've learned to direct our competitive instincts toward achievement rather than destruction. The Secretary General nodded thoughtfully. Continue, Dr. Chen. These aliens likely see our wars, our conflicts, our violence. But they might not understand the context. Every human advance has come from our drive to overcome challenges. We split the atom not just to create weapons, but to power our cities. We went to space not just for military advantage, but to explore and discover. We compete fiercely, but we also cooperate when faced with existential threats. Ambassador Liu looked skeptical. How do we communicate something so abstract to beings who view us as primitives? Dr. Vasquez stood again, her eyes brightening with an idea. We don't just tell them. We show them. In real time. The room fell silent as delegates tried to grasp her meaning. We have 72 days, she continued. What if we use that time to demonstrate the absolute best of human cooperation and achievement? Not just words or promises, but active proof that our species can accomplish incredible things when united. President Martinez leaned forward. What kind of proof? Something impossible, Dr. Vasquez replied. Something that requires every nation, every resource, every brilliant mind working together. Something so ambitious that it could only be achieved through the kind of cooperation these aliens want to see. General Thompson frowned. Like what? We can't build a starship in 3 months. Dr. Chen's face lit up with sudden inspiration. No, but we could build something else. Something that shows we're not just warriors, but gardeners. Creators, not destroyers. She moved to the central display screen, pulling up images of Earth's most devastated regions. What if we healed the planet? In 72 days, what if we turned every wasteland into a garden, every polluted river into crystal clear water, every dead zone into thriving ecosystem? The room erupted in murmurs of disbelief and excitement. That's impossible, the Canadian representative protested. The logistics alone would be exactly, Dr. Chen interrupted. Impossible under normal circumstances. But, what if every military budget, every national reserve, every technological resource was redirected toward this single goal? What if every soldier became an engineer, every weapon became a tool of creation? Secretary General Morrison stood slowly, the weight of possibility settling over his shoulders. A planetary restoration project. Using our entire military-industrial complex, but for healing instead of harm. The aliens said we're violent, Dr. Vasquez added. But they didn't say violence itself was evil. What if we show them that human aggression can be turned toward attacking problems instead of each other? We could wage war against pollution, against ecological destruction, against scarcity itself. President Martinez's eyes gleamed with determination. A global mobilization unlike anything in human history. Every resource, every mind, every hand working toward one goal. Ambassador Liu stroked his chin thoughtfully. Beijing has advanced atmospheric processors that could accelerate reforestation. If we shared that technology freely. Moscow has weather modification satellites, the Russian delegate added. They could direct rainfall to optimal locations. The British representative nodded slowly. London's bioengineering labs could develop accelerated growth plants, designed specifically for rapid ecosystem restoration. General Thompson looked around the room, seeing the growing excitement in every face. The logistics would be staggering. We'd need to coordinate millions of people, countless resources, across every time zone and political boundary. Which is exactly the point, Dr. Chen replied. Any species that can accomplish something like that isn't just peaceful, they're ready for the stars themselves. The Secretary General called for order as excited conversations began breaking out across the assembly. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about the most ambitious project in human history. We would need to put aside every political difference, every economic competition, every territorial dispute. For 72 days, President Martinez said firmly. We can do anything for 72 days. Dr. Vasquez pulled up satellite images of the Sahara Desert. We start with the most visible targets. The Great Deserts, the Dead Seas, the Poison Wastelands. Areas large enough to be seen from space, dramatic enough to show unmistakable change. The technical challenges would be enormous, admitted the German representative. Coordinating that many moving parts across the globe, ensuring everyone has the resources they need. Then, we solve it the way humans always solve impossible problems, General Thompson said, surprising everyone with his sudden enthusiasm. We compete. Not against each other, but against the problem itself. Every nation tries to restore their assigned area faster and better than any other. Turn our competitive nature into a force for creation. Dr. Chen nodded excitedly. Exactly. Show the aliens that human aggression isn't a flaw, it's a feature. We don't just survive challenges, we dominate them completely. The room buzzed with energy as delegates began frantically taking notes, making calls, and sketching preliminary plans. The magnitude of what they were proposing was staggering, but, for the first time since the alien message arrived, they felt something other than helpless dread. Secretary General Morrison raised his hand for attention. We have a proposal on the table. A unified global response that demonstrates humanity's capacity for cooperation, creation, and controlled application of our natural drive for achievement. All in favor? Every hand in the room rose without hesitation. Then, God help us all, Morrison said quietly. We have 72 days to save our species by showing aliens what humans can accomplish when we stop fighting each other and start fighting the impossible itself. As delegates rushed from the building to begin the most ambitious undertaking in human history, none of them noticed the slight shift in the alien fleet's position. The watchers had observed this first discussion with great interest, noting patterns of cooperation emerging even under ultimate pressure. The test had already begun, and humanity was responding in ways that defied their careful projections. The next 71 days would determine not just Earth's survival, but whether humans were ready to join a galactic community that valued creation over destruction, cooperation over domination, and the wisdom to know when aggression should be turned toward problems instead of people. By day 15, the impossible was happening everywhere at once. Commander Sarah Rodriguez stood on what had been the edge of the Sahara Desert just 2 weeks earlier, watching massive terraforming machines reshape the landscape with surgical precision. The roar of atmospheric processors filled the air as they pumped moisture from underground aquifers while simultaneously releasing carefully engineered bacterial clouds designed to bind sand into fertile soil. Status report, she called into her headset, addressing the Global Coordination Center that had been hastily established in Geneva. Sahara restoration running at 127% of projected efficiency, came the crackling response. Australian teams just broke their own record. They've restored 40,000 square kilometers of the outback in the last 72 hours. Chinese atmospheric engineers report Beijing's air quality is now better than it's been in 60 years. Rodriguez shook her head in amazement. Around her, teams from 30 different nations worked side by side, their various languages mixing into a symphony of determined cooperation. Egyptian engineers directed German water purification systems while Brazilian botanists worked with Russian soil specialists to optimize growing conditions for hardy desert plants that could thrive in the harsh environment. The competitive spirit that Dr. Chen had predicted was working exactly as intended. Every nation wanted to outperform the others, but they quickly discovered that the only way to achieve impossible results was to share their best technologies and techniques freely. Competition had transformed into collaboration through necessity. Rodriguez, you need to see this, called Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the Japanese plant geneticist whose rapid growth vegetation was making the desert restoration possible. She pointed toward a section they had worked on just 5 days earlier. Where there had been nothing but sand and rock, a green carpet of specially engineered grass now stretched toward the horizon, dotted with fast-growing trees that were already nearly 3 meters tall. How? Rodriguez asked, though she was beginning to expect miracles as normal routine. The Brazilian team shared their soil bacteria cultures, the Canadians provided their cold-weather plant modifications, and the Israelis contributed their water efficiency genetics. When we combined everything, Tanaka gestured at the impossible garden. The plants are actually growing faster than our models predicted. They're adapting to work together, just like we are. Similar scenes were playing out across the planet. In the Pacific, massive floating cities had been deployed to clean the oceanic garbage patches. Each floating platform was staffed by international crews using technology pooled from every maritime nation. American desalination systems worked alongside Japanese filtration technology and Norwegian renewable energy platforms to process millions of gallons of contaminated seawater daily. Dr. Marcus Webb, coordinating the ocean cleanup from aboard the platform designated Alpha 7, watched as robotic submarines emerged from the depths carrying nets full of plastic debris. The numbers are staggering, he reported to Geneva. We're not just cleaning the surface anymore. Our deep-sea operations have reached the bottom of major ocean trenches. Every piece of human-made debris we can find is being pulled up and processed. The debris wasn't being destroyed, it was being transformed. Massive 3D printing ships, contributed by the combined manufacturing capabilities of Germany, South Korea, and Italy, were turning plastic waste into building materials that were then used to construct underwater habitats for marine life. The pollutants that had been killing the oceans were being transformed into new homes for sea creatures. Meanwhile, in the Amazon rainforest, teams from every continent worked to reverse decades of deforestation. But, instead of simply replanting trees, they were creating entirely new ecosystems. Colombian biodiversity experts worked with Kenyan agricultural specialists to design forests that could grow 10 times faster than normal while supporting higher concentrations of wildlife. We're not just replacing what was lost, explained Dr. Maria Santos as she guided a group of international journalists through the rapidly expanding forest. We're improving on it. These trees are designed to absorb more carbon dioxide, provide better habitat for animals, and resist diseases that destroyed original forests. In 60 days, we've created forest systems that would normally take decades to establish. The journalist struggled to keep up as she led them through groves where thousand-year-old trees towered overhead, despite being planted only weeks earlier. Birds that hadn't been seen in the region for decades were already returning, drawn by fruit trees that had been genetically modified to provide nutrition year-round. But, perhaps the most dramatic changes were happening in Earth's cities. Urban centers that had been choked with pollution for generations were being transformed into green paradises through the coordinated effort of every developed nation's technological resources. In Beijing, Dr. Chen stood atop a building that had been retrofitted with atmospheric processors, watching as the city's skyline emerged clearly through air that was becoming cleaner by the hour. The particulate levels are down 89% from baseline, she reported to the Global Monitoring Network. Visibility is now over 30 kilometers on most days. The transformation wasn't limited to environmental restoration. The project had unleashed an unprecedented wave of technological advancement as brilliant minds from every nation focused on solving the same problems simultaneously. Breakthroughs that might have taken years to achieve were happening in days as research teams shared data freely and built upon each other's discoveries. Dr. James Mitchell, overseeing fusion power development in Switzerland, couldn't contain his excitement as he addressed the daily global coordination meeting. We've achieved stable fusion reactions that are actually more efficient than our theoretical models predicted. By combining plasma containment techniques from 7 different countries, we've created a reactor design that can be built anywhere and requires minimal maintenance. The fusion reactors were being deployed globally to power the massive restoration efforts, but their implications went far beyond the current project. Clean, unlimited energy was suddenly within humanity's reach. Energy production is up 400% globally, reported the Economic Coordination Team from London. And, because we're sharing all technology freely, every nation has access to the most advanced systems. We're not just healing the planet, we're eliminating energy poverty permanently. Social changes were happening just as rapidly. National borders hadn't been eliminated, but they had become functionally irrelevant as people flowed freely between projects based on expertise rather than citizenship. A Russian engineer might spend morning working on atmospheric processing in Morocco, attend an afternoon planning session with Antarctic researchers via holographic conference, and finish the day consulting on ocean thermal extraction in the Caribbean. Commander Elena Volkov, coordinating the Arctic Restoration Project, exemplified this new global citizenship. Born in Moscow, educated in MIT, and now leading teams of Canadians, Norwegians, Danes, and Americans, she had become one of hundreds of project leaders who belonged more to humanity than to any particular nation. "We're doing something unprecedented," she told the assembled team as they watched massive ice restoration platforms work to rebuild the polar ice caps using advanced refrigeration technology powered by fusion reactors. "We're not just reversing climate change, we're taking control of our planet's climate entirely." The ice restoration project was particularly ambitious. Rather than simply hoping for natural recovery, human teams were using controlled nuclear winter technology to rapidly refreeze the polar regions while simultaneously redirecting excess heat to power desert restoration projects. The planet's temperature was being actively managed like a building's climate control system. By day 30, even the alien observers were beginning to show signs of reaction. Their fleet, which had remained perfectly stationary beyond Jupiter's orbit, was now moving closer to Earth. Long-range telescopes detected smaller ships breaking away from the main fleet, apparently conducting detailed scans of the restoration projects. Dr. Vasquez, now coordinating xenobiological preparations from a hastily constructed space station, monitored the alien movements with growing excitement. "They're definitely interested," she reported to the Global Leadership Council. "Ship positions indicate they're focusing particularly on areas where we've achieved the most dramatic restoration results." The alien attention only intensified human efforts. What had begun as a desperate attempt to prove peaceful intentions had evolved into something much larger, a transformation of human society itself. The competitive cooperation that made the restoration possible had created new forms of international relationships that nobody wanted to give up when the project ended. "We're not the same species we were 30 days ago," observed Secretary General Morrison during a global broadcast watched by nearly every human on Earth. We've learned that our greatest strength isn't our individual capabilities, but what we can accomplish when we combine those capabilities with total commitment to a shared goal. The broadcast was transmitted not just across Earth, but toward the alien fleet using every radio telescope on the planet. If humanity was being judged, they wanted their judges to understand that the restoration project wasn't just about environmental healing, it was about species evolution in real time. As day 35 approached, early results were becoming visible from space. Satellite images showed green spreading across former deserts, blue returning to poisoned lakes, and the brown smog over major cities giving way to clear skies. But, more importantly, the images showed coordination on a scale that had never existed in human history. The question was whether it would be enough to satisfy beings whose own technological advancements suggested they had mastered challenges that humans were only beginning to understand. The answer would come in the remaining 37 days, as humanity prepared to demonstrate that their capacity for civilized devastation of problems could match their historical reputation for uncivilized devastation of each other. Day 71 arrived with humanity holding its breath. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the center of what had been the Gobi Desert just 10 weeks earlier, now transformed into a vast garden that stretched beyond the horizon. The morning sun illuminated an impossible landscape of crystal lakes fed by atmospheric water generators, forests of trees that grew in perfect geometric patterns designed for optimal carbon absorption, and fields of crops that could feed millions while requiring minimal water or soil nutrients. Final status reports coming in from all sectors, announced the voice from Geneva through her earpiece. Global atmospheric carbon dioxide levels have dropped 34% below pre-industrial baseline. Ocean pH has been restored to optimal levels across 89% of maritime zones. Biodiversity indexes show recovery rates exceeding all projections by factors of 3 to 10. Chen closed her eyes and listened to the sounds around her. Birds that had never existed in this region before sang in trees that had been engineered to grow in formerly impossible conditions, while artificial streams babbled with water so pure it exceeded natural spring water quality. The air itself felt different, cleaner and, somehow more energizing than anything she had ever breathed. But, the real miracle wasn't the environmental restoration, remarkable as it was. The real miracle was what had happened to humanity itself. Dr. Chen were receiving communication from the alien fleet, crackled through every radio frequency simultaneously, just as the original warning had arrived 71 days earlier. Around the globe, every human stopped what they were doing. Construction crews building the last atmospheric processors in the Atacama Desert put down their tools. Marine biologists monitoring the newly restored coral reefs in the Pacific held their breath. Engineers maintaining the polar ice restoration platforms in Antarctica froze in place. The voice that emerged was the same mechanical precision as before, but something in its tone had changed. Species designation, human. Observation period complete. Analysis of behavioral modifications requires clarification. Direct communication requested. Dr. Vasquez, now aboard the International Space Station that had been expanded into a proper diplomatic facility, responded immediately. We're ready to communicate. Where would you like to meet? Coordinates transmitted. Atmospheric entry in 60 standard minutes. Within the hour, craft unlike anything in human imagination descended through Earth's atmosphere. They didn't burn with entry heat or leave contrails, they simply materialized in the sky above major population centers as if the laws of physics were polite suggestions rather than absolute rules. The lead ship settled gently onto the restored plains outside Geneva, where representatives from every nation had gathered. As Dr. Chen and her fellow project leaders watched, a section of the alien craft simply became transparent, revealing figures that were both alien and, oddly familiar. The beings that emerged were tall and graceful, with elongated limbs and faces that seemed to shift between expressions of curiosity and something that might have been amusement. Their leader, distinguished by more elaborate clothing, approached the human delegation with movements that suggested perfect control over gravity itself. I am Observer Prime Zephi of the Galactic Preservation Council, the being announced, its words somehow heard directly in every human mind rather than through their ears. We came to evaluate a species reported as aggressively expanding and potentially dangerous to galactic stability. President Martinez, now serving as the Unified Earth's primary spokesperson, stepped forward. We received your warning and have attempted to demonstrate our capacity for peaceful cooperation. Peaceful cooperation, HFY repeated, and something that might have been humor flickered across its alien features. Your species eliminated atmospheric pollution that had accumulated over centuries. You restored ecosystems that had been destroyed across millennia. You transformed wastelands into gardens that exceed the natural productivity of your planet's original biosphere. We worked together, Dr. Chen interjected. Every nation, every resource, every mind focused on creation instead of destruction. Yes, HFY agreed. You turned your military-industrial complexes into environmental restoration systems. You redirected your competitive instincts toward problem-solving rather than territorial expansion. But, most interesting. The alien paused, consulting a device that seemed to be made of crystallized light. You did all of this while maintaining your fundamental aggressive nature. The human delegation exchanged uncertain glances. I don't understand, Secretary General Morrison admitted. HFY gestured toward the transformed landscape around them. Other species, when faced with our evaluation, typically attempt to suppress their natural behaviors entirely. They try to become what they think we want to see: docile, non-competitive, restrained. These species invariably fail our assessment because they become less than what they were, rather than more. Dr. Vasquez felt a spark of understanding. You weren't testing whether we could become peaceful. You were testing whether we could remain human while becoming something greater. Precisely. The aliens' approval was unmistakable. The galaxy has no need for another passive species that avoids conflict through weakness. We have thousands of those. What we need are species capable of civilized devastation, beings who can apply overwhelming force against problems that threaten galactic stability. General Thompson, who had overseen the military transformation into an environmental restoration force, stepped forward. You wanted us to prove we could be aggressive toward the right targets. Your species has a remarkable talent, HFY explained. When you identify an enemy, you do not merely defeat it, you utterly annihilate it. When you decide to solve a problem, you do not merely address it, you completely dominate it. This is not a flaw to be corrected, but a strength to be properly directed. Commander Rodriguez, still bearing traces of sand from her desert restoration work, asked the question that was on everyone's mind. What kinds of problems? HFY's expression grew more serious. The galaxy is vast and contains threats that require species capable of total commitment to their destruction. Plague planets where diseases evolve faster than normal biological immunity can adapt. Rogue artificial intelligences that expand exponentially and consume entire star systems. Environmental catastrophes that spread across light years if not stopped with absolute thoroughness. And you want us to handle these threats? President Martinez asked, struggling to grasp the implications. We want you to join a community of species that specialize in different forms of galactic maintenance, HFY replied. The Calthari are master builders who construct habitable worlds from lifeless rocks. The Vorn are perfect administrators who can coordinate resources across thousands of star systems. The Shivani are unmatched healers who can resurrect entire ecosystems from genetic fragments. Dr. Chen felt her pulse quicken. And humans? Humans are problem eliminators. When something threatens galactic stability and cannot be reasoned with, negotiated with, or gradually contained, we need a species that will pursue its complete destruction with relentless efficiency. Your species has proven that you can direct this capability toward worthy targets while maintaining cooperation with allies. The assembled humans stood in stunned silence as the magnitude of what was being offered sank in. You're inviting us to join a galactic community, Dr. Vasquez said slowly. We are offering you a purpose worthy of your nature, HFY corrected. Your planet will be provided with technology to support interstellar travel and communication. Your people will be trained in advanced sciences and provided with resources beyond your current imagination. In return, when the galaxy faces threats that require civilized devastation, humanity will respond. What about our autonomy? General Thompson asked with military directness. Do we become servants of this Galactic Preservation Council? You become partners, HFY assured him. Each species in the community retains full sovereignty over their internal affairs. But, when threats to galactic stability emerge, member species contribute their specialized capabilities to the solution. You would never be asked to compromise your principles or harm innocents only to apply your remarkable talent for thorough problem solving against genuine threats. President Martinez looked around at the restored landscape, thinking of the millions of humans who had worked together to achieve the impossible in just 10 weeks. And, if we refuse? Then, you continue as you were, with our blessing and our monitoring. The evaluation period has proven that your species can control its destructive impulses and direct them constructively. You are no longer considered a threat to galactic stability. The choice of whether to become a force for galactic protection is entirely yours. Dr. Chen stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overcoming diplomatic caution. The technology you're offering, how advanced are we talking about? HFY gestured toward his ship, and, suddenly, its hull became transparent, revealing internal systems that seemed to bend space and time. Energy sources that could power your entire planet for millennia without any environmental impact. Transportation that allows travel between star systems in days rather than centuries. Manufacturing capabilities that can transform asteroids into habitable worlds. Medical technology? Dr. Vasquez asked, thinking of all the diseases and conditions that still plagued humanity despite their recent achievements. Genetic repair systems that can eliminate hereditary diseases, extend lifespans indefinitely while maintaining physical and mental capabilities, and adapt human biology for life on worlds with different atmospheric compositions. The offer was staggering, but Secretary General Morrison focused on the core issue. And, in return, we become the galaxy's military force? Not military in the sense of conquest or domination, HFY explained. Think of yourselves as specialized emergency responders. When a crisis requires total commitment to its solution, when half measures and gradual approaches are insufficient, when the very survival of multiple worlds depends on completely eliminating a threat, that is when humanity would be called upon. Commander Rodriguez thought of the past 71 days, of the incredible sense of purpose that had driven every human to achieve beyond their individual limitations. Would we be working alone, or with other species? Always in cooperation with other community members. The Kelthari might build the infrastructure needed for a response. The Vorn would coordinate resources and logistics. The Shivani would handle medical and environmental restoration after a threat is eliminated. Humanity would be the force that ensures threats are thoroughly and permanently removed. President Martinez looked around at her fellow leaders, seeing the same mixture of excitement and responsibility in their eyes. We need time to discuss this among ourselves. Of course, HFY agreed. We will maintain our position in your system for as long as you require. When you have reached a decision, simply broadcast your answer using the same radio frequencies that delivered our original message. As the alien delegation prepared to return to their ship, Dr. Chen called out one last question. Why us? Surely there are other species with similar capabilities? HFY paused at the edge of the ship's transparency field. Other species can be trained to be aggressive when necessary. But only humans seem capable of being simultaneously ruthless toward problems and protective toward allies. Your recent demonstration proved that you can completely annihilate obstacles while carefully preserving everything and everyone you choose to protect. We showed you civilized devastation, Dr. Vasquez said with sudden understanding. You showed us devastation with conscience, HFY replied. The galaxy needs guardians who can unleash total destruction against threats while maintaining absolute commitment to protecting innocent life. This is a very rare combination. As the alien ship lifted silently into the sky, the human delegation stood among the impossible gardens they had created through their own version of civilized devastation. They had 71 days to save their species by proving they could channel their aggressive nature constructively. Now they had to decide whether to use that same nature to help save the galaxy itself. The choice would define not just humanity's future, but its place among the stars as protectors capable of waging war against problems while maintaining peace with allies. It was a responsibility as vast as the universe itself, and exactly the kind of impossible challenge that humans had always been uniquely qualified to devastate completely.